How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions podcast. Today on the pod, we're going to be talking with Barrett Brandon. He is the CFO at Ventum Bikes. If you have not heard from them, you should definitely check out the show note descriptions and check out their bikes. They just came out with a new triathlon bike, and it is pretty sick. You also noticed in the beginning that I called him Brandon a few times, and then he corrects me so graciously because his first name is actually Barrett. So yeah, some funny moments in there. But without further ado, I want to introduce you to Barrett Brandon. Awesome. Well, Brandon, I guess first things first, just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on to the podcast. It's been a long time coming. I know you have been super busy just with your line of work in itself, but thanks for making the time and for coming on.
Absolutely.
How you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Pretty standard Tuesday, but
Yeah.
we have our engineering meetings and just some other random stuff we go through, but it's pretty typical week. Getting
Yeah.
ready for the holidays next week, but things are good.
Yeah, for sure. So with the holidays coming down the pike, I'm curious because as part of my life where I actually to make money, like I help run a small team for a real estate business, and this is the first year where we have enough people on board where we need to like be specific about holiday schedules and time off and all that stuff. So I'm curious because it looks a little different every year based on how Thanksgiving, Christmas land with New Year's and all that. And it's kind of chaotic. But how do you kind of structure that?
Yeah, so we have some holidays over Thanksgiving and then holidays over Christmas. We'll take the Thanksgiving day and the day after, so kind of a long weekend. It's also nice here. We're in Park City, so a lot of people ski, and it's kind of opening ski weekend. So it's a super
Okay.
fun time to kind of get ready for winter, hang out with friends and family.
Yeah.
And then we're relatively flexible for Christmas, kind of depending on the holidays. We usually take 4 days off minimally, Christmas Eve, Christmas, New Year's Eve, New Year's, and then kind
Hmm.
of roll it in together to try to give the employees a nice little break. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it kind of varies year to year, but that's kind of our basic schedule.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. So you're in Park City area. Have you always lived there? Like, were you born and raised in and around that part of the West, or where are you from?
No, I'm a Texan, so I'm a
Oh, wow.
transplant. And for the people that are keeping score here, I moved here before COVID.
Okay.
So as most mountain towns, there's some amount of consternation of the COVID influx of people, but
Oh, yeah,
no,
sure.
my wife and I moved here in 2019. That was basically the company Ventum that I work for,
Yeah.
raised some outside capital, and it was tied to some investment in some rural grants here in Utah.
Hmm.
And so part of me coming on board with the company was relocating the company from its respective location in Miami and Denver, and then consolidating it and moving it to right outside Park City in Heber. And so that's where
Okay.
we've been for 5 years. And then as part of that company shift, I also came on board with Ventum and then moved here. So it's been about a little over 5 years now.
Okay, nice. So before Ventum days, before even going back before college and high school, like where did you grow up?
Yeah, so grew up in Fort Worth, so in Texas. That's where I went the high school. I went to college at University of Nebraska for a few years, swam
Okay.
there, then got into triathlon, and then moved back. My wife and I moved back. We're there for about 10 years after college. So
Okay, so
mostly just in Fort Worth, outside Dallas, but
yeah.
that's definitely what still kind of feels like home, even though it's been a been a
Yeah.
few years now since we've been back.
Yeah,
So
sure. Do you think you'll ever like in a different phase or season of life end up moving and back out toward that area, or have you fallen in love with the mountains?
it's a question we ask a lot. I
Really?
really there's aspects of Fort Worth and aspects of Texas that we miss a lot. Some good friends there. I really enjoy kind of the heat in the summers. Um, and I think we've learned to love the mountains. Neither my wife nor I were like mountain people. I didn't
Hmm.
ski before I moved here.
Yeah.
I still don't hike or camp really.
Yeah.
It's kind of a joke. But no, we love where we're at. Never say never for anywhere. So like there's always a chance. But
Yeah.
yeah, happy where we're at now.
Yeah, for sure. So when you were growing up in Texas, as a younger kid, like, did you have siblings that you were able to run around and get in trouble with?
Yeah, so I'm the oldest of 4,
Okay.
and so I'm the oldest. Yeah, we ran around, got in trouble, played outside, all the stuff 90s kids did, right?
Yeah.
Like that you, didn't have devices, didn't have phones, things like that,
Yeah.
but, no, we had a good time, played outside a lot, and pretty normal standard, probably Texas upbringing in the 90s for sure.
Yeah. So in your lineup, being the oldest, have you seen how that has shaped, I guess, your style of leadership and just the style and the way you approach life?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like, I think being the oldest really matters when you're in your formative years, when you're in your high school and junior high, and life has changed so much since then. Like, I don't it might be a stretch to glean some
Hmm.
managerial knowledge. I think, relating
Sure.
to people is something when you're in a leadership position, you kind of have to uh, learn on the job, learn as you go. It's a skill set that's learned. I don't think a lot of people have it naturally. I think
Hmm.
it's a really, really tough one. But yeah, I think having those sibling relationships are always fun, always great. They're a great support system and kind of like the earliest best friends that you have, right, as you grow up. And
Yeah.
so I think they're really, really fun. And then, you go out into the world and you're in your business dealings and you're learning how to interact and lead people there. And that's also it's a different kind of fun, different kind of
Mm.
relationship. And that's been rewarding.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, different seasons of life. Yeah, I the reason I asked that is because I grew up oldest as well, with
Okay.
of three. So I have two younger sisters. One is
Oh,
4 years younger than me, and then the youngest is 12 years younger than me. So there's quite a bit of a gap. Um, but just in the dynamic of our household, like I did notice, I think probably because of the more complexities that sit within the relationship with the father and mother relations and how that transformed over time. Like I really did pay attention to that, I think, a little bit more, just because in some ways the childhood ended a little bit earlier. So I was just curious, but it's interesting how you said like the support, because I don't think everybody has that. I think that's a unique to be able to have siblings that are you can grow close with. So I'm curious, as you grew up, were they always close, or did you ever go through a season where like you're close as a kid, you're hanging out, then maybe you get older, everyone starts maturing at different rates, you kind of grow apart, and then you kind of come back around to that?
yeah, that's an interesting question. I think I'm closer now to my siblings than I ever was when we were like younger, right? I think
Yeah.
our friendship has grown and deepened over this phase of our life. I think I was heavily involved in sports. I did swimming and everything else. My sisters were less. They're a couple years younger than me, so 2 years and 3 years basically younger than I am. Um, so I think like they had some other different goals and things that they were interested in high school and things like that. And you have your traditional like sibling. I wouldn't call it a rivalry, but just kind of like the back and forth when you're kids. And I think as we've all grown up, they have families, and it's been really rewarding for that relationship to grow for us and like become to deepen over time. So I think that
Mm,
yeah, it's something that's been fun as we've gotten older to watch them and their kids grow. And um yeah,
yeah.
I value that immensely.
Yeah. How do you find being an uncle? I'm a fresh, new to the world uncle, as of like the last 7 months, and it's affected me ways, and I haven't expected. I expected it to be more like that probably when I have my own kids. But how has that been for you?
Yeah, so my wife and I don't have any children, so like I think it's very fun to be the fun uncle. I'm the
Yeah.
oldest. I very much embrace being the fun uncle, helping
Yeah.
the little toddlers get in trouble. I love it actually.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably like the most fun. We don't have kids, so we don't have grandkids, so I don't know what that's like, but I'd imagine it's kind of similar of you have this thing that is related to you and it's precious and fun, but also like you can hand them back to their parents and then walk away.
Yeah.
So
You don't
it's
have to do all
really
the
like
hard stuff.
yeah, exactly, right? Like
Yeah.
when they throw a temper tantrum, you just walk in the other room.
Yeah.
So yeah, being an uncle is fun. I have fun with that.
Yeah. No, same. I look forward to some of those years. So just in the few minutes of conversation, I think you referenced a couple of times is obviously like the leadership aspect, a managerial experience, being involved in sports as a younger kid. Relationships seem to matter to you, and you come across, at least to me, as a relatively stoic person. So, my question for you is with all these different experiences and the different seasons you've had moving from professional sport to now where you find yourself and getting married, who would you say that Brandon is?
Well, so Brandon's my last name, just so you
I'm so
Barrett's
sorry.
my
I
first
am
name.
so sorry. Barrett.
So we
Oh,
can
yeah, that's
segue to my
embarrassing.
parent.
Thank you.
We can segue to my parent. I was gonna let it slide the first time, but
No, I'm glad you said it. I'm so sorry.
my parents gave me two first names, so it is Barrett Brandon. Can I do a funny triathlon aside story? So
Please, please do.
related to my name. So I did my first like real triathlon was Buffalo Springs half Ironman at the 70.3 now. I don't even know if it still exists out in Lubbock, Texas. It was part of the Ironman
Okay.
series. And I after my freshman year of college, I swam and I wanted to do a triathlon. So I signed up for this half Ironman, trained all summer, then I went and did it. And I remember Tim Yount, he's the COO. He's definitely
Yeah.
still at USA Triathlon. I think he's the COO. He's been there forever. He was an
Yeah, I know him.
announcer there. And as I was running across the finish line, I'll never forget this. He goes, and here comes Barrett Brandon, or is it Brandon Barrett? I don't think we'll ever know. And that's like, as I crossed the finish line, that's what he said. So I don't even know if Tim knows that. We know each other relatively
Oh,
well now, but I'm highly used. You can call me Brandon. You can call me Barrett. But
okay.
that's a brief segue. Can you
Yeah, yeah,
repeat the
yeah.
original question? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even remember the question to be honest. I think oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'll just say I literally have no excuse because your name is written on the screen right here in front of me. So I literally have no excuse. But the question is, based on all the experiences, because one question I like to ask is this one to a lot of the guests just to kind of get
Yep.
an introspective look at
Mhm.
what they think. But who is Barrett?
Yeah. I mean, man, I think the question was about the stoicism and then who is Barrett.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it's a really difficult question to answer. And I think like who you are kind of changes in the context of how you have to ask that question or answer it. And I think who I am at home with my family, is someone that's maybe a little bit different than who I am at work. I think there's still some authenticity and you can draw a through line between those people. They're not separate people.
Hmm.
But I think like, in a work context, um, I tend to be a little more stoic, a little more um, you know, the word I would use is even keeled. I think one of the things about trying to run a small business or help people run a small business is that you get a lot of things thrown at you. It always seems like there's fires. It always seems like maybe larger companies are more dialed or have more bandwidth or things like that. And so
Hmm.
it's this constant avalanche or constant onslaught of information and problems, and you're having to constantly problem solve. And so I found for me specifically, whether I'm in a leadership position or not at the company, like being able to try and maintain an even keel, persona and response, whether things are good or bad, has suited me really, really well up to this point. And I think like a lot of a lot of people, if especially if they haven't started a business or they haven't worked in a small business, they think like, oh, there's just this one thing or this I get over this one hump or this one week or this one product launch or this one
Hmm.
hire and then I'm X. But the reality is that you're just there and then you have a new set of problems. Sometimes they get larger as you grow that you have to kind of deal with. And so I think for me, trying to take a little bit more of a stoic approach, even keel, has served me well. And I think also too, it, y- I try to be unflappable. I definitely get flapped sometimes,
Hmm.
but I think that like one of the ability to be resilient and kind of respond to a variety of different circumstances is definitely something that has helped me here at Ventum in the last few years.
Mm. Are you familiar with the individual Reid Hoffman?
From LinkedIn?
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah. So Reed, I used to listen to him religiously on his podcast when he created Masters of Scale. I don't know if you've heard of that podcast, but he
I
always
haven't listened to it, but I'm
described,
aware of it. Oh.
yeah, so he always described like, in the startup world, and his perspective is coming primarily, I think, from the tech space. So there's obviously some differences there, with like hard goods, but I think the analogy works well that he always describes, or has often described, a startup with, you're jumping off a cliff with all the parts to make an airplane, and you're building it on the way down, hoping that you can pull out of the nosedive. But I think it's even more than that. It's almost like it's a hang glider you're trying to build, and then for a very long time, as soon as you get that thing together, you're like always seeking the next updraft, and then hoping that you don't hit the ground before you can kind of find the next one. And I haven't led businesses quite to the scale I think that what you are doing, but I can definitely relate to that feeling of, it's just like, yeah, it's a constant. Oh man, you let the anxiety off of this. We passed this season, or we got that line of credit, or whatever it is that we needed, and then you're constantly looking forward to the next thing. You're like, wow, I didn't realize that this mountain continued to peak every ever further.
Yeah, it's kind of like the idea that you get to the top of the mountain and then you think you're over it, and then there's just like mountains as far as you can see, right? Like I feel like that's
Yeah,
in a lot of ways the journey, any entrepreneurial journey.
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting too. You mentioned tech and like people like Reid Hoffman. Uh, one of the difficulties of a product based business is that like scaling is not easy. Like if you build software,
yeah.
like yes, your software can crash or you can't have enough servers to sustain a launch or something like
The
that.
traffic.
But
Yep.
in reality, like the ability to scale and in some senses is a lot easier. Whereas like we have baked in supply chains that are months, if not years long, and product
Mm-hmm.
development cycles that are really, really long. And um yeah, so I think like making actual stuff is an added layer of complexity, but it's also an added layer of kind of joy, ownership, and when you can actually take something from your head, an idea, and you can iterate on it, you can design it, you can manufacture it, you can bring it to
Mm-hmm.
market, and then you can deliver it to someone who loves the product that you make. I think there's something very like deeply rewarding about that, which maybe doesn't always happen in software,
Mm-hmm.
or the tech world. And I think they both have their pluses and minuses, but it's really fun. Like at the end of the day, like for us at Ventum, we all love bikes. We like riding bikes. We like, new bike day is just as exciting for us as it is for, a customer at home.
Yeah.
And so I think that like there is some of that tangible excitement and joy that kind of, I think maybe pushes all of the mountains that you have to climb to get there in the back of your mind when you're trying
Mm-hmm.
to launch something new. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely been fun.
Yeah, it's a beautiful journey. I love entrepreneurship so much. Like, I had my first little business when I came out of college, and we made a product. It was these insulated hammocks, and making them was great. But for me, I think it's just interesting how the different people involved in the entrepreneurial world, the different pieces of joy that they really grab from sometimes seemingly small thing to another person. So for me, we made the product, but whenever I had the boxes made for this product and it had the name on it and they felt quality, and I got it in from Asia, there was just something to me that, like, oh, I made it. Like, this is what I wanted. This is what I envisioned. And now that it's in a box, for some reason that brought me so much joy. And that kind of shocked me. I was wondering if anybody else would really feel that same type of a thing.
No, no, it is sometimes the smallest victories or the smallest piece of something that you absolutely get right that can have maybe it doesn't have an outsized impact on the end customer, but for you as the person designing it, it can be really empowering. We have this ride ready box that looks like a coffin, it's massive and all this stuff. And basically you can get your bike and build it within 10 minutes, even if you don't know what you're doing, right? And but part of that was like the design process of
Yeah.
designing all the pieces inside of it and all like the wheel cutouts and all these trays and what are we going to use this for? What future products can they fit in here? And so it's like one of those
Mm.
like tangential things to what your actual business is. but one that's really rewarding. Another one is like when you like nail like a t-shirt or a soft good or like a little
Yeah.
logo and you're just like, we have this rabbit that is it's our Hayuenta's logo. We've used it mostly for gravel, and like we're
Yeah.
like, I want it on a patch. Actually, I have one here, so like I can.
Oh yeah, here we
It's
go.
like this guy right there, but like this
Oh
is a little
yeah,
patch
cool.
on my desk. But like it's just one of those things when you nail that, you're like, this is. It's
Yeah.
just so rewarding. You kind of live for those moments sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So with the stoicism part, I'm curious. So I would love to adopt more of that behavior and ability. I think it takes a lot of practice, but for you, is it something that you adopted over time as kind of a way of nurture out of necessity because you've been through a lot of these fires and you've survived them, or is it something that you really wanted to adopt so you honed in on it and focused on it and have like made that a disciplinary practice to reach?
Um, I wouldn't say like I wouldn't say that I am like a practicing stoic or I am like trying to abide by the principles of stoicism. Um,
Sure.
I would just, I am naturally a little more even keeled and, as some people will tell me, monotone. And so
Yeah.
it's just something that like that's kind of like my natural default. And to be
Mm,
honest, you know, as a leader, trying to inspire people and get people excited to work with you, work for
can be
you,
tough.
motivate a team. I've actually had to sometimes lean out of that and really focus on um, how I can, engage people, meet them where they're at, and just get them excited about things. And so I think
Yeah.
like everything, it's a balance, right? I think you can't be completely stoic, you can't completely be a cheerleader. Sometimes you need to myopically focus on one task, sometimes you need to take a step back. So I think part of being successful is having the self-awareness to know, like, how to interact, relate in different types of situations, different types of people. I don't think that means being a chameleon, but I think it does mean being
Mm,
a little bit flexible and, um, there's a time for everything, that kind of adage. And I feel like in the business world, that definitely seems to be true, right? At any certain point, there's a bunch of different paths you can take, and it might be right to do it this way one day and then this way another, just kind of depending on the situation. So,
mm. I'm curious if you've observed this, but at least to me, it has seemed like in the past, I guess it's been even closer to 10 years now, but I'd say probably more accurately 7, at least in my observance. When it comes to entrepreneurship, those who start and run startups have become almost like these rock star figures. I don't think it's as much anymore, but it still exists because everybody's like, oh, yeah, I want to start my own business, and it's like, they really don't know what they're saying unless they actually get out and start doing it. So for you, has that I guess what is your thoughts on that? Because I know that you're a practicing, like you're staying even keel, like you have like a mission and a job, but I imagine people reach out to you or are really inspired by that. Like, how do you handle the attention that comes with that type of a conversation or admiration, or do you even think about it?
yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, like, I definitely did not coin this term, but it's the idolatry of innovators. I
Mm-hmm.
listened to some other podcasts where, I think, and I think in a lot of ways that's more of like unicorn tech startup people that go from zero, raise $100 million capital for $1 billion
Yeah.
business, like go public, that type of thing. We're very early in our stage, so I think there may not be like that. That's probably not as prevalent in like our industry and where we are. But I think like for me, it's more about treating people with respect, and I think to me that's probably the most important. Whether it's your lowest employer, your boss, your CEO, whoever it is, like finding out how to work with them, what makes them tick, how to treat them with respect. And I think like that's at the end of the day, that's the best way to do business. And I think y- learning another thing too, like maybe just kind of adjacent to that question is learning to accept others' ideas, to like, create a culture where
Hmm.
people can give you feedback, right? I think a lot of times, especially as you manage up or as you deal with people, that are your senior, like you may not feel like you can go to them with ideas or questions or things like that. And so trying to create a culture of that where, there's this openness and the ability to think critically and to elicit kind of that feedback loop where people feel like they have the space to do that. And so like
Hmm.
I think those are things that I try to do. Sometimes I definitely miss the mark or fail on those, but that's something we try to do here at Ventum. And I think one of the benefits of being in a very, very small company is that, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of people are just there trying to do their best to just move this forward and fix this problem,
Hmm.
right? And so I think like creating that culture is super important.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, how many people do you guys have on staff or on payroll that you kind of work with in terms of number of team members?
Yeah, so we have about 15 here in Heber. We have a few in Asia. We outsource a good chunk of our marketing. We have an agency that we work really, really close with in Salt Lake. Um, and then engineering as well. So we use Kevin Kwan for our engineering. So like basically they're a bicycle boutique engineering firm out of
Hmm.
Toronto, and um, we work. I was just on a call with them before we hopped on this call, but they
That
have
would
a
have been
few
fun.
engineers on our account that work with us, and so like we use a hybrid. I think it's hard to full-time resources, probably 20 to 25 equivalent, somewhere around there. So we're
Yeah.
definitely small, but feel like we go a long way and we do a lot with what we have.
Yeah. So the reason I asked that question specifically is because I find myself working and helping lead a team of about seven. So it's significantly smaller, but I'm just starting to run into this awkward growth stage where, we're coming up with more policies and all this stuff that I absolutely detest, but there is a need for it. But you mentioned specifically like wanting to curate a culture where suggestions and thoughts and ideas can be to have space to live so that everyone can kind of make a conclusion together on whether or not you should adopt or give those ideas further thought. But I'm curious because I know now from experience that some people they'll join on day one and maybe this is a hiring problem, but they'll join on day one, they have potential, and then they have all of these suggestions that are really poorly informed for the context of just like the greater situation and like making suggestions that are either already in place because they don't see, around the corner, or it's just it would not work for whatever reason. So, how do you adopt a culture practically or deal with those types of situations where you want people to be heard, but you don't want people to be almost constantly complaining or just thinking that they have the solution to everything where, you can just get a lot of noise. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand the question. I think it's interesting. Most people don't have the full understanding of the context of like what they're either asking for, what they're helping, and that's why you as a leader do, right? And you can kind of shield that. And um, you know, I feel like like as someone who is leading people, it is probably more important to foster that curiosity and deal with maybe some slight pushback if, hey, like this is a great idea. Here's why we can't do this practically,
Mm,
right? Do you know what I mean? Or
yeah.
like, this is a great idea. Have you thought about this person in the business and how this would affect them and their department? Right. And so I think like for me, I always, and I tell this to people that we hire and that I work with, like, there's a good chance you won't be here in 5 years. You might be working for a different employer. You might be somewhere else in the bike industry. And my number one goal is to equip you to whether you're here or whether you're somewhere else to be, uh, to have a greater skill set than when you started. Right. And so, like, I think that, like, I view no matter where the employee is in their journey, like, it's your not duty, but it's in your best interest to help them grow. Um, and grow into a bigger role than they're at. And part of that is like getting them to ask questions, to be inquisitive and go back and forth. And I think one of my kind of my mentors that I worked with before this, um, he always would say, you want to hire your replacement. Like if you are
Mm,
afraid to hire your replacement, because you think that they're going to take your job, then you shouldn't be in management, right? Like you should
Yeah.
always hire somebody that has the skills to push you and that wants to kind of come for your job at some day. And I think like there's probably some caveats to that, but I think in
Sure.
some sense it's this idea of like building a culture where people have ownership or inquisitive, um, and want or both not necessarily loyal to the organization, but like loyal to this idea of bettering themselves and improving themselves. And yeah, I think it's something that is always a kind of a work in progress, and
Hmm.
nobody gets perfectly right, but you can always try to iterate and try to be better and try to move that forward.
Yeah, for sure. Great answer and some good practical stuff there. I think as I'm kind of filtering down and digesting what you're saying to me, like it may even be distilled down a little bit more and or parts of it to just I guess be humble because for me, as a leader or whatever, like you're saying, if you're going to hire your replacement, that takes a certain level of death of the pride, or as some people coin it buzzwords these days, like death of the ego, so that you can have that peace and knowing like, hey, if they do come for my job, like good, that's great. Because if everybody has that mindset, then all the ships will rise with the tide. Like that's just kind of the inevitable. But getting people to adopt that mindset in a world that is incredibly, or a country, I should even say probably, that is so individualistic and career focused. Because the first question we asked each other when we don't know somebody usually is, "Oh, hey, what's your name? Where are you from? What do you do?" Like that's what we want to know. Like what value do you
Yeah.
add to society? And something that really kind of stuck with me with a recent conversation or podcast, I can't remember what it was, but there was this idea floated that, well, in the Japanese culture, that one of the first questions that they ask is, "How is your family?" And, if we were all in a place to ask that question first, I think the conversation would lend quite different results. But I mean, that's the culture that the America has adopted. And that's where we live. And it's not necessarily saying that it's terrible or wrong, but it's
Yeah.
interesting how we place so much value on that aspect, and then we want to build a culture that kind of kills that idea a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like, I think my informed perspective is from companies of a certain size, right? If you work for Google or if you work for Apple, like
Sure,
it is a working for a multi-thousand, tens of thousands of employee organization is quite a different,
different
like,
animal.
you know, it is a completely different world than where we are.
Hmm.
And so like I think that, like a lot of my decisions are coming from informing from sizes of small companies that are trying to grow and how do you build out that? Because, you said you had 7 people. Like yeah, if you lose a person, like you're losing 15% of your
Hmm.
workforce, right? Like you lose 2 people, it's 30%. Like that's only 2 hires or 2 fires or 2 people moving, but that materially, like, changes your business, and we're the same way, right? Like, for a long time, like, we lose a person, it's 7.5% of my total workforce, right? And so, like, that's like, how do you build systems and processes and redundancies and a lot of these things to be able to cope with that? Because,
Hmm.
their work is cyclical and people do come in and out, and I think that's
Yeah.
one of the challenges as you scale and when you're really small is figuring that out, so.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. So for you, going back, I guess, a little bit to the personal aspect of who you are, what you've done, where you're going, where you're at, um, when thinking about just your personal career, I'd be curious to know the story of how high school ended and you were deciding like to go to college, and then you were also entering the world of professional triathlon. Like, how did those things coalesce and then eventually graduate you to the place where you were deciding to move out full time into the workforce? I guess was in like 2016, and that's a big time chunk. So take as much time as you want to unpack it, but
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear.
Yeah, I could definitely walk you through. There's some inflection points in my life for sure. So I swam growing up, just wanted to go to the Olympics like most swimmers do. Was a decent
Hmm.
swimmer. Looking back now, I was never going to the Olympics. But I was fast enough to go swim in college. So I went to swim at the University of Nebraska. Super excited. Like that was like my real dream. Like was to like be a part of a college swimming team. They were really good. They're top 25 in the country. I made it through my freshman year, and then they cut the men's program due to Title IX. So like it was like I remember
Oh,
it was like end
sheesh.
of March. We walked. Our athletic director called us into the locker room and said, "We're cutting the men's program." And
Oh my
so that
word.
went from like having a team, having a place, you know, kind of being super happy to like, what do I do now? And it was really late in the season, and I didn't know where I wanted to transfer to. Like, it was like Nebraska was where I wanted to be. So trying to decide if I wanted to go somewhere and still swim, and so I was looking at some other schools. And that summer,
Mhm.
I mentioned early in a story earlier, I did a triathlon. I bought a bike, just decided to do it to train over the summer. Did a triathlon. Decided I really, really liked it. Long story long. There's a lot of arcs here. I,
Yeah.
uh, I went back my sophomore year and I redshirted because I was gonna transfer my junior year to Georgetown or somewhere else and swim. That was kind of like my idea, right? And while I was still swimming, training with the club team there, the idea that I was gonna go swim somewhere, I was also doing triathlon on the side, and
Okay.
that kinda became more and more the focus, and swimming kind of fell off, and,
Mhm.
um basically, I got recruited by USA Triathlon because of my swim time, and I ran okay, and so I went into their development pipeline. I had some early success in triathlon, and then basically, I was about ready to graduate. I decided not to transfer and swim, was doing triathlon, winning some races, doing well, and decided I wanted to race as a pro, and so started to do that, and this is around 2005, 2006. It's also when I met a little bit before then, somewhere in there, I met my now wife who was swimming on the women's team. And so I wanted to do triathlon. I didn't want to leave Nebraska 'cause she's a few years younger than I was. So I thought I'll just go to grad school. So I got my MBA.
Okay.
I was the assistant coach or the, grad assistant coach for the women's team. So I was able to like stay with Lauren, my wife, and
Yeah.
coach, volunteer or not volunteer, I definitely didn't volunteer, grad assistant coach, and do triathlon and get my MBA. So I made my parents happy. I could do triathlon, could
Yeah.
stay there while Lauren finished. So anyways, so that was kind of I got
Checking the
my
boxes.
MBA, and then that was into 2007, and then I was like, I just want to go all in on triathlon, and so I did triathlon. I raced ITU short course for 5 years exclusively after that through like the 2012 Olympic cycle, and traveled everywhere. Was on national team, not on national team, like, kind of all over the place, like, trying to go
Mhm.
through the various levels of federation support and USA Triathlon
Mhm.
and things like that. Loved every minute of it, and then 2012, I didn't make the Olympic team. Still love triathlon, but I was like, "I need to start using my head." And so I had
Mm.
found a homestay who, in a race in Kansas I had done that he's like, "Hey, I have an entry-level position in my accounting department. I know you have your MBA, but if you wanna come work for me, you can work from home, you can still race,
Oh,
and
sweet.
would that work?" And I was at a place where I was moving maybe towards long course for a few years, and it was a nice way to, like, build some work experience, and so that was kind of the first company I was at from 2012 until about 2019. I worked for that company with nothing to do with triathlon or,
Yeah.
endurance sports or anything, and just kind of cut my teeth. And I raced Ironman and did some fun stuff there. And then in 2019, I was looking to change positions, and Dia, who CEO founded Ventum, was looking for a business partner to come help him with the finances we were raising. He wanted a business partner to come help him run the company, and so it was kind of fortuitous timing for me. And I joined in 2019, and so that's kind of like my arc
Yeah.
of triathlon into business and everything else. And it's been a nice journey. It's been fun. I've had different, like you mentioned, phases of my life for sure. When I was just racing, then I was racing and working, and then now um, I actually do race. I do a lot of gravel cycling nowadays, just because I found out I
Yeah.
love goals. But it's definitely
Yeah, that's awesome.
secondary to the day job. It definitely is not the priority. But yeah, that's
Sure.
kind of how I wound up where I am today.
Yeah. So going back, I'm going to ask some questions, I guess, throughout the story arc here. When you were making that switch to like be just, focus on swimming, you realize, I guess, like, oh, maybe I could be more success over here. I'm sure there's an aspect of like fun. And then also, then moving through that and you're getting to the Olympics. So I guess it's two questions. First, was it an easy transition for swimming to triathlon? And then I'll ask that one first, actually. It'd just be better.
Yeah, so it was I ran cross country and track in high school. So like and I was mediocre, but I had some running background. Swimming was always what I did. I was just a swimmer since I was 10.
Yeah.
Um I would say like the triathlon was it was a relatively easy transition in terms of like just I had done two of the three sports. Cycling's probably the easiest to pick up from a technical standpoint. And I had some early success, early on in 2000. So I started basically in 2002 or 3, and then in 2004, I won collegiate nationals, which is like non-draft. It's a club,
Yeah.
but it is pretty competitive club sport. And so that was
Yeah, for
kind of
sure.
like my aha, like, "Oh, I'm actually, like, can be pretty good at this." And so that was kind of like a jumping off point, where I could, I'm just like, "Oh, I should maybe dedicate more time and see where I can take this." So I had some relatively quick, um, success there that spurred interest.
Yeah. On the topic of the Olympics then, because like I said, or like you said earlier, you wanted to go to the Olympics. At some point, you hit that point where you realize, like, okay, this isn't going to happen. But did that fire become rekindled, I guess, when you jumped into triathlon and you had your eyes set on, trying to make the Olympic team? Is that like a rekindling of the dream?
Yeah, I don't know if the dream ever dies, like, it's almost like you are, like you just disassociate with any you disassociate the possibility that you may not achieve your goal, right? And you
Hmm.
just head down and go at least that's how I process things. And so,
Hmm.
like, it was a very quick time period from, like, "Oh, I wanna be swimming," and I always thought something would click, and now looking back, like, older hindsight, all maturity, all of these things, like, I'm 5'9". Swimmers
Yeah.
are 6'4", and, like, it was just not gonna
Wingspan of
happen,
an
man.
eagle. Yeah.
Exactly. I actually, a funny story, my wife is actually a good swimmer, and I went to watch her
Hmm.
at a swim meet one time, and I had to use the restroom, and, it was a pro swim meet, and Michael Phelps was there, and I
Like,
remember going to the bathroom, and I'm walking back on deck, like, towards the stands, and I was probably, like, 3 feet behind Michael Phelps as he's jumping in the worm down pool, and
hmm.
he's just his lats were like this giant V, and I just looked at him, and it was like this biggest realization of, like, I was never gonna make it, like,
Yeah.
that is what, like, a swimmer was designed as, like, in, like, a AI
Hmm.
model was him,
Yeah.
and, so anyway, it was, yeah, but, yeah, I think when you move into triathlon, it was always this, like, could I make it? And I think I was ranked as high as 8th or ninth in the US, 3 people go, um, and so, like, always close enough for it to be like, "Is it possible? Can I make this jump? Can I make this tweak in training or tweak in racing that we'll do this? Is there this race scenario that favors me that could yield this outcome?" So I think you always have that. And
Hmm.
that's part of the fun part about sport is like chasing that. Um, so I sound kind of like an
Yeah.
addict when I say it, like
No.
chasing that like that fix. But I mean, in a lot
Yeah.
of ways, sports are addictive and performance is
Yeah.
addictive, and yeah,
No, no, yeah, it's totally true. I understand that even from just like an amateur level. The pursuit of, oh, and the belief sometimes like that ridiculous belief that you can get somewhere, which you're like, oh, if you're honest with yourself, will I actually get there? I don't know, but that's what's needed. I mean, it's same with entrepreneurship and business. Like the naivete that you are able to jump into some new project with, in a lot of ways, gives you the ability to get as far as we have. Because if I knew all of the steps required to do things I've done in the past, I may have been like, I think I'll reconsider, because it is so much.
Yeah, 100%. Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA founder, right, whose stock
Mhm.
has gone to the moon recently and is
Yeah.
everywhere. I think he was asked, like, maybe a few months ago about, like, what would you recommend for entrepreneurs? And he's like, "I would recommend not doing it." And it's
Yeah.
like, people that look from the outside, they're like, "Oh, what are you talking about? You're one of the richest people in the world," like, all these things. And I think, like,
Mm.
maybe take that away. It's like the nugget of, like, this you don't know what you don't know, and most people if they knew that, they would never start, right? And it's
Yeah.
like almost like you mentioned this naivety of like, you don't know how hard it's gonna be to qualify for Kona, you don't know how hard it's gonna be to finish your first half, you don't know how hard it's gonna be
Mhm.
to try and make the Olympic team. Like, whatever your goal is, you just start, you take that first step, and if you knew all the subsequent steps, maybe you wouldn't take the first step, but I think that that's kind of part of the fun and part of, you know, the learning experience. It's definitely what I appreciate about sport. Um, is sometimes you just gotta take the leap and not really try and figure out everything because 'cause you're gonna have to figure it out
Yeah.
while you're doing it.
Yeah, similarly with Elon Musk, someone asked him in an interview, and you've probably seen this, but most people look at him and idolize him in a bunch of different ways, just because of the sheer amount of projects that he's been a part of that have been, influential in our culture and history. But when asked, do what would you say to people who want to like follow in your footsteps? Essentially, I don't remember the exact question, but he said, I think most people, if they understood what's going on in my brain, like they wouldn't want to be me. And I think that really speaks true to the fact that, a lot of these leaders of the people who get put up on the pedestal, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, whatever, you can be the richest man in the world, whatever that means. But you can also, with that wealth comes a wealth of problems and a wealth of inability to sleep peacefully at night. I'm sure some people do it, but it seems like what you get is what you get. And it's really easy to look at the shiny, pretty things, but then over on the other side, you realize, like, okay, well, if you don't have any time to invest in your family, to like you're saying, you kind of have these compartmentalizations where your work Barrett and then you're at home Barrett, and there is some crossover, but to have the ability to kind of shut things off and be anonymous, to go and be just completely removed from the crazy business world, like even in nature or with your spouse or your partner or whatever, like that is a gift that I think doesn't get enough attention, that should be talked about more, because once you lose that anonymity, it's gone, at least for a long period of time. To fall back into obscurity is a relatively hard thing to do, I think.
Yeah, like, I mean, trying to draw analogies between different things sometimes is tough. Like, I I think that, um, like, one of the things I really, really enjoy about athletics and is just the goal setting process, right? And so, like, yeah, like, I think the analogy of, like, going from, you know, my life to, like, would I wanna be Elon Musk? Like, is that even, like, a really a fair analogy for a lot of people, right? Because it's so transformational from where most people are right now. But I think, like, one of the things,
Mm-hmm.
the great equalizer of, like, sports and goal setting is that, like, everybody has kind of their own journey. A lot of times it is this dissectable, digestible, like, tranche of their life that is separate to, like, their main life, their family, their job, their everything else. And you can kind of, like, I don't wanna say run experiments, but, like, it's almost like you can do this goal setting in a small subset of your life, which is really impactful to you. I find it is very impactful to
Oh
to
yeah,
to
for
do
sure.
those things, and like, and then you can take the successes, the failures, the things from that, and then transfer them over into your personal life, transfer them over into
Mm-hmm.
business, right? And I think it's a low risk way to kind of to push yourself, to create some structure, to yeah, to do a lot of things, like, to be bold and to maybe fail, where really, like, the what failure is just kind of a conceived or contrived thing that you've decided for yourself, and it's like failing
Mm-hmm.
at work is probably a little more has a little, graver consequences than, like, not meeting your
Oh,
goal
personal goal,
at
yeah.
your personal goal and exercise. But anyways, I think they're I've as somebody who's been involved in sport pretty much my whole entire life, like I really, really value that side of my life still, even though it's a much smaller part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's still very meaningful to me, and I feel like in a lot of ways it anchors my professional life. It can anchor my personal life is as much as that's weird. Like I think, or maybe not weird, but as much as that, I think sometimes people think that, this kind of notion of exercising and setting goals and doing all these things can be, subtractive to your family. But I think in a lot of ways it can be additive and has definitely helped me with my mood and focus and everything
Mm-hmm.
else. So I think like there's always like anything, there's balance, there's nuance there. But I think that yeah, I think it's really, really important. And I've there's been some periods in my life like in the last 10 years where I've kind of fallen away from it. And I can find when I have a goal, something that I can strive towards, something that I can do, like it really helps me in other aspects of my life. And so like I've started to make it a focus as much as I can.
Yeah.
And it's yielded good outcomes for me.
Yeah, no, I have a shared experience. I think, like you said, it does. There is some level of nuance, and I have seen firsthand, even from my own experience, finding the balance of because especially being like newly married, no children, it's really easy to kind of allocate extra amounts of time to my own self, and then kind of forget about my partner at times. And we've gone through seasons where, like, we needed to really sit down. I need to sit down and reevaluate what my priorities were because that dream or whatever it is that we tell ourselves that we're going to get and put our head down, like that can afford issues in any relationship. But on the same token, it is like you're saying, it's taught me a great deal about just the abilities that it allows us to have. You said, mental focus, clarity, those types of things. And from the worldview I come from, being like a Christian, more specifically an Adventist, religion was a very big part of who I was growing up. And then I shunned it. And then, turned 21, kind of decided what I believed and why I believed, did the studying and came to this conclusion. And one of the biggest things that kind of has been the parallel or like a connecting point between, athletics and business, but more specifically athletics and mental ability and spiritual life has been this concept that within Christianity, it's believed that we are vessels that hold our soul and things. So if I look at it from that respect, I'm given this really nice car that I get to drive. But if I perform the maintenance on it and upgrade the parts by using them, because the body works a little bit different than a car, so maybe it's not the best analogy. But if I put the time and energy into that system, this vessel becomes like a very pleasant and beautiful thing to live inside because it's an expression of what's actually is my consciousness and my soul living on the inside. And I think that when people stick to something, I think it really, for me, it took probably 2 years or more of like consistency in the endurance world to start to really realize like what you're saying. Oh, that mental clarity, that focus, the ability to think clearly, the ability to articulate a little bit better and to have the confidence even to have conversations with people. I think really stems back to that confidence that we slowly build in ourselves when going on longer runs. And every time it's a little longer and maybe a little bit faster, swimming, biking, running, whatever your sport, it really affords confidence to be able to have, I think, deeper conversations and a better lived experience in all aspects of life.
Yeah, no, I think that, and I agree with, or that resonates, I think a lot with what I said. I think like the thing that I take most from kind of my previous and current like athletic history is just this idea of like showing up every day, doing a little bit, getting a little bit better, and stacking those blocks day after day, month after month, year after year. I think like one of the things that like a lot of people that haven't been a pro or professional athlete or done it for their living or anything like that, that that, like, they forget is that, like, as you get better in your sport, your improvements decrease, right? Like, instead of, like, improving
Hmm.
5 or 10% a year, you're improving 0.5% a year, right? And so, like, you do more and more work for little smaller and smaller gain, right? And so
Hmm.
it's this thing that, like, Now it's not one workout, it's 4 months of workouts to get this little small percentage of incremental gain. And I think, like, that's very powerful when you transfer that over to other aspects of your life. And I think that, the analogy that I would make for business specifically is that, you have to you show up every day, and it's not the one presentation, it's not the missed reconciliation that you did on this or that. It's the volume of work, it's showing up day after day, month after month, year after year, just expanding your skill set, but also, like, helping whatever organization you're in at that time move forward, right? And I think, like, the real kind of unlock, if you will, is the ability to do that, like, over a prolonged period of time. And
Mm,
I think that there's a lot of value. um, I think there's a lot of analogies to endurance sport, and that's definitely how I resonate with it. It doesn't matter where you start, you can kind of see that growth and see that improve. And I think that there's definitely something to be said in the business world for that as well too, and just how important that is. And a lot of people chase the one gain, the one thing that will make them better. And in reality, almost without fail, it's not one thing, it's a lot of little things over time that add
mhm.
up.
Yeah, 100%. So with your ability, I would say there's an ability or skill that you seem to have developed over time. Is this when you're changing the seasons of your life? You don't strike me as one who would really struggle with, oh, my identity was really wrapped up in this one thing. Like, how do I move to the next thing? Because you even mentioned several times, in the things that you've learned and honed in the athletic world, like it was, I don't know if relatively easy is the best way to say it, but you found a way to like translate those over to the next thing. So the reason I kind of bring that up is you mentioned earlier that you failed to make the Olympic team. And so that dream came, you saw it full circle and it didn't happen. Was that hard at that point in your life to be able to kind of package up that identity and say, well, I can graduate this to something else or move on? Or like, how painful was that?
I think, like, I think in general, high level sport is just painful because there's really there's really never success, right? Like, that might sound weird, but I think if you're the best in the world, you want to be the best in the world for 2 years. If you win a gold medal, you want to win two gold medals.
Mm-hmm.
If it's almost like this, Sisyphean task of pushing the boulder up the hill that always rolls down, right? No matter where you are, you probably could be better. And let's be honest, only a few people win medals, only a few people win Ironman World Championships, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of other very, very good athletes that don't even reach at that level.
Right.
So I think, like, part of sport in general is just unmet expectations, and then you retire, and then you deal with your own mortality. So, like,
Yeah.
it's a pretty tough transition. And I think, going from, giving up on your Olympic dream, it's something that could start very early, and it never leaves, especially in sports that you do them, like gymnastics or swimming or things like that, when you're doing it when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, right? Like, it is just
Mhm.
in your brain, no matter,
Yeah.
um, no matter your level. And so, like, I think you find ways to cope with that. And then as you get older, like, I'm at some point, like I'm never gonna race as a professional again. And, like, that season of your life kind of goes by, and you have to deal with that. And I think each one has been uniquely challenging and difficult to deal with. And but I think that, uh, it's not something unique. I think it's not something unique to athletes. I think just most people, they go through their different phases of their life, and those phases end, and you transition to a new one, and you either do it well, or sometimes you struggle. And yeah, I don't know if I have any any specific things that I would say to help, other than, like, it's easy for me to look back on the last, 20, 25 years, and look back fondly, and wish that I would have enjoyed the
Mhm.
moments a little more. Like, instead of focused ahead
Mm.
on always the next thing, like, I think I was the other day I was talking to my wife, and I've either done a triathlon or a cycling race in 37 countries. So it's like,
Wow.
which is kind of crazy when you think about it, right? That's yeah, so it's really, really cool, right? But if you would have asked me 10 years ago, it'd have been like, oh, I need to just get better. I need to get, make my run faster, swim faster, bike, blah,
Hmm.
blah, blah, blah. And so now, like, I'm true, in some amount of, hubris or whatever, I'm trying to kind of enjoy those things and enjoy the moment a little more. And maybe that's just something that happens with age. I've never been this age before, so I can't quite,
Yeah.
can't quite tell you.
Yeah. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
No, I'm 42. I'm 42. So
Okay.
on the other
So you're
side of
10
40,
years my
I can tell
senior.
you, like, all this talk about things, the midlife crisis is real. It's funny. It's you get through these phases of life, and I feel like you hit 40 and you're like, yeah, like, I'm no longer a young adult. I'm an actual adult, and that's
Yeah.
that's been interesting. But yeah, it's all good.
Oh, yeah, well, so you hit that. You're 42, like you're 10 years my senior. So I'm trying to really glean just selfishly some of these experiences you're talking about and really consider, well, am I thinking that way now? And is it good to think that way early before I hit that point? Because the midlife crisis is definitely a thing, like you're saying. I think it's we're all getting there because we're all kind of aging to non-existence at some point or another. So as you have approached that, and it seems like you're pretty happy with who you are now. Like you're taking more time to kind of savor, I guess, the experiences and the moments, looking at the places you've been rather than necessarily the things you've done. Like it's that living in the moment. What what would you say to me as like I start to approach ever so quickly those years where I will end up being 40, 50 years old, like to kind of start to adopt and maybe appreciate those experiences even more now? Is there anything you think I could even do?
No, I think the first thing is you're asking questions, right? Like you're curious, you're um trying to learn. I think that was probably something that 10 years ago I wanted to accomplish a task and thought I knew everything, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
um asking questions. I think I think enjoying the seasons that you're in life are something that is um, something special, and it's really easy to say. I think it's hard to do, right? And I think, like, you can when you get 10 years from now, I think, you're as an athlete, your body definitely starts to change, right? I can still ride hard, still do some fun stuff, but like things like the reality of that is of that as an athlete's changing.
Sure.
But I think that, I think you're also, uh, yeah, you're well equipped to handle things that, I wasn't equipped to handle 10 years ago. So, like, if you asked me for one piece of advice, I would just say, and it's a little, I wouldn't say it's tongue in cheek, but I feel like it's very much, just enjoy the moment. But, yeah, enjoy the moment.
Yeah, yeah. No, no, it's true. Like, we can all share with each other the color yellow and say that that looks yellow, but how do we know that everybody else is looking at that color with the same eyes? Because some people might see our yellow as green. Like there's this with verbal communication. We always say these things that are cliche, and they have very deep-seated meaning and understanding, and what we how we hear and define them in our own just whatever's going on upstairs. But it's true, and I think I'm starting to figure that out. It's taken some smacks in the faces to realize like how important those moments can be, especially in the context of like people not necessarily being there in the future that you share those moments with. I think that's what makes a lot of moments very special. We do have those. I have had solitary moments too that I look back when I was by myself and had some kind of epiphany or whatever too. So those do exist. But yeah, no, I appreciate that advice. And yeah, I when I get to 42, I'll make sure to call you up and see what's going on at 52. That way we can kind of do this again, and then hopefully the next 10
Giving
years will
that
be a little bit more
give you a
enjoyable.
10-year heads up, so to speak. And
Yeah.
actually, as I was listening to you, like, one other, like, small tidbit I would say is, kind of throw it all the way back to the start of the conversation when you talked about just, kind of being a little stoic. I think don't let the highs be too high and don't let the lows be too low. I think
Mm,
as you get older, you realize what's important, and things that you flipped out about or thought that the world was ending are not as impactful as you think. And likewise, the things that you think are the best thing in the world are short-lived. And
Hmm.
and I think like you know, part of that's about being in the moment and enjoying where you're at. But I think like a lot of people can get fixated on things when they go bad or fixated on things when they go good. And a life in a lot of ways, most things are in the middle. And I don't mean that in an average blah vanilla type of way, but I think just
Yeah.
how you react to the situations is really informs a lot of things that you do. And so I think that trying to manage those highs and lows just leads to like a little bit more um stable and yeah, this stable attitude and can be helpful. So that would be my other thing
Yeah.
to throw it back to where we started.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. That's a great way to bring it all the way full circle to a wonderful conclusion and then advice. So Barrett, I guess I just want to say thank you so much for taking the opportunity again to share. I really enjoyed the conversation. Feel like I have learned a few things, and I really would love to have you on again and go deeper into some of these areas. I know we touched on a lot, but I really
Yeah,
appreciate the way you think and what you guys are doing at Ventum. And obviously, a fan of your wife, had her on the podcast. So looking forward to,
yeah.
if you're open to it, having you on for another time.
Yeah, Seth, would love to. Thanks for the conversation and making me think. And I came into this not, I didn't know if we were going to talk more about Ventum, more about like sport, more about life, but I thoroughly
Hmm.
enjoyed it and I appreciate the time and the platform.
Thank you so much to Barrett for coming on the podcast and letting me, as usual, ask a lot of really cool questions. He is definitely a deep thinker, a stoic guy, so I look up to that. As is my senior, obviously in age, and so has just really cool experiences. And I always enjoy that because as a younger dude, looking to older dudes who I find trustworthy and interesting, it's always nice to ask them questions to hopefully apply something to my life so I can be a little bit better. So I think that's something that we could all learn from. And in asking him some advice there at the end, or just some advice he offered, really, when it comes to living life and learning to savor the experiences, which are the memories that we create, which are really the only things that we carry forward with us in life, aside from our character. He said, don't let the highs be too high and the lows be too low. Definitely easier said than done. But even the contemplation of what that means in our own respective lives, I think has the ability to help us in a lot of ways and add value, not only to our own lives, but those who interact with our lives. So I will end it with that. Thank you so much for listening. If you are listening or watching on any of the platforms such as YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. If you are on Instagram or if you are listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, any like or review, comment, any of the things that you can do on the respective platforms, it really does continue to help us to grow. And I would appreciate it. If you want to support the podcast, you can also do that at the link in the description below. And that would help me to put out these episodes. They are not free, but they are a gift. And I love giving them. So thank you so much. And we will catch you guys in the next one.